Hello. What I'd like to talk to you about today is assessment and its importance across, obviously, your time as an English teacher. Now, there is no doubt when we think about assessment, and you would have seen these videos previously, but I just want to think about it from an English teacher's perspective for a moment. Obviously, our job when it comes to assessment is to understand what students can and can't do, and then what we need to make sure we are doing to ensure that happens. So there's no doubt about it, you cannot be a successful teacher of students if you do not understand assessments and are able then to apply and use assessments correctly within your lessons. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is a quick run through of the various different types of assessments that you can expect to be undertaking as a teacher. Again, you should hopefully have already seen previous videos in relation to assessment types, but I just want to give you a quick reminder. So our main types are summative, formative, and diagnostic. Now, a really easy way to remember this, or one way in which you can remember it, because actually formative and summative can sometimes be a little bit confusing, is according to the assessment expert Paul Black, when a cook tastes the soup, that's formative assessment. When a customer tastes the soup, that's summative assessment. So obviously, a couple of things to think about here. With formative assessment, that is the assessment which allows teachers to gain an understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the students. And you're doing that all the time, via questioning, via written tests. All the time as a teacher, you should be thinking about your formative assessments. Your summative assessments allow you to evaluate the understanding of a student. So that tends to be your high stakes terminal exams over the course of the year. And a diagnostic assessment, which we sometimes consider to be an initial assessment, is undertaking some kind of assessment type which allows us to see what the students already know, so your prior learning. So, how do you set up a formal assessment? Well, actually, if you thought that setting a formal assessment up was just putting a test on a piece of paper in front of the students when they walked in, then you've obviously missed the point of how you plan a unit. So you're obviously looking to build up to a certain point, whether that be a homework for revision and the students are aware of it, whether that be some kind of end-of-year assessment. Obviously, being able to set up a formal assessment correctly doesn't just happen a day before. So obviously think about how many days have you got left, how many weeks have you got left, and then you can start to build in how you plan your time to make sure that happens. I would also say allowing the students to know when that's going to happen is good planning, because obviously a lot of us, whether you're 13 or 30, if something important is just sprung upon you, we panic, you get a negative reaction, and then you create negative connotations towards that test. And that might be the very reason why that student, when they get to 16 or a job interview at 22, panics and doesn't perform to the best of their ability. So do think about how you inform students. Do you even use the word test? Do you even use the word assessment, depending on the ability and the kind of maturity of some of the individuals in your group? That's why creating and setting up the right kind of atmosphere is so important. The students will not panic if they feel they understand everything they need to know. So obviously, if you can stand there because you've delivered the materials over the course of your scheme of work, if you can stand there in front of your students and say, we have covered this, you've done this work on it already, you simply now need to make sure you've revised and practiced, and then you're going to see the kind of results that you're hoping for. That creates that confidence that you're looking for with the students. That obviously helps for them to have confidence in you, because they understand actually this person, this individual who's teaching me knows what they are doing. They've helped to guide me towards that as well. Okay? So as I said already, giving students that prior notice does help to also create that sense of seriousness, but it takes away some of the pressures that come about with that. One thing to consider with this then is to think about your homework. So how do you use homework? Do you call it homework? Do you call it revision? I tend to call it revision for year 11s, because obviously homework again has had previous connotations for some of them. So think about how you use that additional time to help support your students as well. Prior to the assessment being sat, obviously you should be thinking about all the way through, and again these are a series of ideas which you should have come across already hopefully. Think about your assessment for learning. So think about your modelling. Have you modelled? Have they modelled? Have you deconstructed different ideas and how it should look? Have you also thought about the success criteria? Now, if I ask you to sit in a car and drive, but I've never taught you how to do that, it's no surprise you can't start the car. So if we're asking students to undertake a piece of writing or a drama performance or whatever it may be, and we just say, okay, go. That might be okay if we're talking about your initial assessments, but when we're talking about your formative assessments and summative assessments towards the end of units and their GCSEs and A-level exams, that's not going to be good enough, and you've not obviously done your job there as a teacher as well. During that time when they're sitting the assessments, it's up to you, but it tends to be you might want to model exam-style conditions to create that sense of seriousness. You might allow them to have some planning time prior. Again, that's something you'd need to consult with your English department prior to doing this, because obviously some schools, different schools, will administer assessments in different ways. Some even do it as a kind of exam in a hall somewhere for each of the students. So do bear those things in mind when you're thinking about how you plan your assessments.